Got him. Yeah. In the upper part of the water column there. Good sized fish. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the best fishing line to use when you're out ice fishing. This guy calm down real quick. There you go. Nice little buck brookie. Give me my worm back. Come here, buddy. Get you right in the top of the jaw. There we go. Get that guy back in the water. So there's basically three primary lines that you can use while you're ice fishing. The first and cheapest and most widely available is monofilament. The second is fluorocarbon, and the third is braid. So I'm going to go over some of the characteristics of these different lines and why I choose to fish these different lines in different situations. So the first type of line I want to focus on is monofilament. Monofilament is one of the most widely available fishing lines out there. It's relatively inexpensive. You can expect only to pay a couple bucks for enough to spool your ice fishing reel. It is very stretchy. I don't know if you can see that, but I can easily stretch that several inches, and of course the more line you have out, the more that it stretches. Now that stretch can be both a disadvantage and an advantage. So for example, when I'm fishing dead stick rods in shallow water, I like to use monofilament because that's going to help keep the pressure on the fish while I'm trying to get over to the rod, and then I can start fighting the fish. However, because of that stretch, if you're fishing really deep, it can mask the bite, or if the bite is exceptionally soft, that stretch can actually make it so you can't even detect the bite on the rod tip or on your bobber. So if I'm fishing 15 feet or deeper, I'm just not going to fish monofilament. Shallow, yes, absolutely I will fish monofilament, but I don't like to fish it on really light lures because you can see there's memory there. You see when I take the pressure off this thing, it coils up really bad, and that because of that coiling and that memory, if you have a really light lure on there, it'll actually coil up, and again you can miss the strike. But it does have its advantages. I do prefer to fish really light monofilament, so I'm not going to go heavier than 4 pound. If I need more than 4 pound breakage strength, then I'm going to transition to either fluorocarbon or braid. Oh, there's fish. Come on. Got him. Alright, the second type of line I want to talk about is fluorocarbon. So, oh, that's a little guy. How cute is that? He's going to grow up to be a bigger fish someday, though. Hey, don't do the wiggle wiggle. So fluorocarbon looks superficially similar to monofilament, but it has a lot of different physical traits and characteristics that separate it from monofilament. For one, is it doesn't have near the stretch that monofilament does. It also is a much higher density. Because of that higher density, it helps to get smaller jigs to the bottom. So if you're fishing really small tungsten or lead jigs and you need some help getting them down there faster, fluorocarbon is definitely the way to go. But another thing, because of its higher density, it has a much higher abrasion resistance when it's rubbing on the ice. So you're way less likely to snap off because of abrading on the edge of the ice hole that you've drilled. So that's the advantages of fluorocarbon. Additionally, it has extreme ability to transmit light, so it just virtually disappears underwater. So if you're having trouble getting fish to commit to the bite, if they seem a little line shy, fluorocarbon might be the way to go for you. In general, I'll fish fluorocarbon anywhere from 2 feet all the way down to 50 plus feet. Especially if I'm fishing for those toothy fish like pike and walleye and such, I'm going to fish fluorocarbon because just in case their teeth catch on it, it's going to be less likely to cut through. Alright, so that's fluorocarbon. Okay, there are two primary types of braids. There are thermally fused braids like this fire line here, which is what I have spooled up on this reel. And then there are your woven braids like Power Pro. Now, I will almost always run thermally fused braids, and the reason for that is those woven braids have a lot more surface area, and you tend to get a lot more ice formation on your line, which is really problematic whereas these thermally fused lines don't tend to have the icing issue as much. That being said, they still do accumulate ice much faster than monofilament or fluorocarbon, which have very smooth surfaces on them. But there's also some other advantages to braid. One is it has absolutely zero stretch. So if I'm fishing anywhere below 20 or 30 feet, especially if I'm getting below 30 feet and I'm fishing for panfish that bite really light, I'm going to run braid. That's just going to let me detect that bite so much easier because there's absolutely zero stretch in it. It transmits that full signal up to the rod tip and I can detect the bite. Some other advantages of braid is because of that low stretch, you can get really good hook sets very deep as well. And that, there's fish. Just saw my rod tip there, I wasn't paying attention. Woo, look at that. Oh, really pretty little male brookie. Alright, buddy. Get back in there. Thank you. Oh, there's another fish down there right now. Let's see if we can get him. So another thing, because of that stretch, like you said, I can see that bite. It transmits really fast to the rod tip. So if you're jigging deep for perch or even jigging deep for like lake trout, that braid is really going to let you detect the bite and get a good quality hook set at depth. There is some drawbacks to braid. It is very expensive relative to monofilament and fluorocarbon. You're going to look at expending anywhere from 2 to 4 times as much on braid. But another problem with the braid is that it's not transparent, so it's very easy for fish to see, which is why I will almost always run a leader on here, which I connect using a uni to uni knot. And I'll put a link to some videos on how to do the uni to uni knot. It's a really nice way to tie line to line without having to use a swivel. Here I'm running a fluorocarbon leader, but you can run monofilament if you want. I just like fluorocarbon because of that abrasion resistance. Another thing to remember is when you're tying on these leaders onto your braid, to make sure that you do at least a couple feet of leader, because if you do shorter, then when you're fighting the fish right at the hole, that knot is rubbing right on the edge of that ice hole, and that's one of your weakest points, so it might break. So I hope that this little summary of the different types of fishing lines helps you decide what you want to go for. In general, like I said, if I'm fishing shallow, I can get away with pretty much any line type. However, if I'm going to go deeper and I want to be able to detect the bite, then I'm definitely going to go with braid. And fluorocarbon is sort of the in-between. It can do quite a bit. It has that abrasion resistance, but it just doesn't quite have the sensitivity that braid does. As far as pound test you're going to run, it's all going to depend on the fish that you're targeting. For most panfish fishing, you're going to need anywhere from 2 to 4 pound, and you'll be fine. If you're going to be fishing on lakes which might have some larger trout or bass or catfish, then getting up there around that 6 pound mark is probably a little bit safer bet. And if you're going after pike and lake trout or mackinaw, then you probably really need to step up your game to 10 pound braid or more. Alright, if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below and I'll help you out. I'll put links to my favorite ice fishing lines below as well. Be sure and hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time out on the ice. Have a good one. Catch lots of fish. See you guys.